Alright, hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Cleaning and Restoring. I have not done one of these in a long time, but we'll be doing the Sega Dreamcast. Now this is not mine, this is my friend Teeohh, link to his channel in the description. He's lending me this so I can do this video because I don't have one of these. He actually has two. This one doesn't work. I'm trying to fix it, but I mean, it's the controller ports are broken. We have to replace them. But I'll figure out how to replace them if he buys the spare ones. So, I'm going to get right into it, and I'm going to be doing a lot of talking while unscrewing because I feel like it, honestly. Because there's a lot of parts that you have to unscrew in a weird order, so I can't do a bunch of jump cuts because I'll end up skipping stuff. So the first thing you're going to want to do is remove this if yours has it, which most do. Well, all of them come with it, but if yours is like old and you lost this somehow, you want to remove this and set this to the side. Obviously, this is not washable. And then there are 4 Phillips head screws on each corner. One is under the thing we just removed. 2, 3, 4. So we're going to take those screws out. And like I said, I'm going to be doing a lot of talking during the removal of the screws. Mainly because, like I said, they're in a weird order. And also, these screws are mainly black. If they're different, then that's weird. But honestly, there's no big deal if they're different. But I would suggest separating your screws by the type of screw rather than like usually when I separate screws I do it by like where they go. Like even if screws are different, if they go in at the same step, then I'll put them together. I would separate your screws by what type they are, and I will explain why. You'll understand why once we get into the console, which after this last screw we'll be right in. And if you're gonna complain about me taking out the screws on video, then just skip it. I don't care if you are mad about it. Alright, so after you've got those 4 screws out, you're going to flip it back over so that the lid is facing you, and you're going to lift up on the top. And it may be a bit hard to get out, but once you do, you'll lift it off, and it'll be pretty easy. Now this is what yours may look like. However, there may be a few changes. Like one thing, this gray wire right here that's twisted around, it may be actually under this thing, and if so, there's no big deal. It's just, it literally is the exact same step. It's not that big of a deal. And that's honestly the only change you'll see. So we're going to set this aside for right now, and this is kind of complex to take apart. And the reason I'm doing a video on this is because I've watched other people's, and they only get to this step, and then they clean this with air, and they take the whole lid apart. I'm doing this a little bit differently. I'm going to show you how to get this stuff completely out. It's a bit of a pain, but if you want to, you can. So let's set this out of the way, and we'll do the lid for right now. Now, first thing I should mention, if you're looking at the lid, if yours is a newer model, yours will have a piece of gray foam right here, and it should only be glued in on one side, and it would look like this. This is the foam right here. If that's there, you can either pick it off or rip it off, honestly, and glue it back on. That's what I'm going to do. And the thing is, this lid is actually pretty complex in terms of like how it goes together and everything, but when looking at it, there actually is no electronic parts in it. So if you don't want to take it fully apart, which is what I'm going to do, just leave it exactly how it is. You don't have to do anything. This is all plastic or metal, so it's completely safe to wash. So we're going to take out the 2 buttons just to wash those separately. And the ones right here, there's 2 things sticking up on each side. You want to push the 2 things together so they slide down. Take a screwdriver and just poke it out, and it should fall out down here. There's the power button. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. This one I have to kind of maneuver around because it's in an odd spot. But yeah, they come out pretty easily. And this whole lid on its own is completely washable by itself. And if you're wondering how to open the lid because you want it to like air dry, what you have to do is take this big white plastic thing and pull it away from the lid like this, and it'll open. So the lid by itself can be washed. You can just set that aside. And now we're going to the electronics. Now this is where if you don't think you're that good at taking things apart and putting them back together, this is where you need to stop. Because let me tell you, holy crap, this thing is complicated. And it's not too hard, and using my video should help you quite a bit. But the first thing you're going to do is there's 4 screws on the controller ports. Now you're going to take those 4 out, and they should be longer brass screws. Separate them. These are the only 4 long brass screws in the console. And that's why you want to separate them, because there's different types, and certain types go to different places. And I also made a note on my phone, just in case I ever forgot, on where every type of screw goes. Just in case I forget. So, this will be a lot easier if you take the screws completely out, rather than loosening them and just letting them sit there. If you take them completely out, you will have a lot easier of a time getting these ports out completely. Okay, now, you may hear rattling. That's probably this piece of plastic right here, because there's nothing holding it in anymore. but it will not come out, and you'll understand why later. So the next thing you're going to want to do is go over to this switch right here. This is the power switch, and you're going to take out the two slightly smaller brass screws that hold them into place. These are going to be called the regular screws, the regular brass, because they are the most common that you see in this console. So you're going to take off the two regular brass screws, and you can pull the switch off like this. Now, if yours has this gray wire under it, you can just flip it aside, or since mine doesn't, you can just move it completely out of the way. And there's two more regular brass screws, one right here, and one over here under the gray wire, which is kind of hard to get to. But you're going to remove those two screws. Like I said, they're just regular brass screws. Let me get this one out. Oh god, it fell out. I'm going to get the screw out because the screw fell in an odd spot and I can't get it out. There we go. Okay. Now where'd the screw go? Okay, there it is. Okay, so you take that screw out, and then there's another screw over here by all these batteries and things. It's right there. You're going to remove that. And once you've gotten those out, there's nothing holding this piece of electronic in besides a tiny little clip over here. And you're going to pull the clip aside with your finger like this, and you'll see it instantly loosen. Pull up on this side where the port is so that it comes out from the clip. And now, there's 6 metal prongs in this thing that are actually fed through on the other side of this. So you're going to lift by this side and just carefully slide it off the metal prongs. And after you've gotten that, you can lift on the other side with the port again, and you can take this piece out on its own. Obviously, this is not washable. However, you can use compressed air to try to dust it off, basically, or use a Q-tip to try and dust it off as well. Now, after you got that out, there's this little piece of plastic that'll just lift off. You can take that out as well. Next, we are going to remove this laser system right here. Now, before I start doing anything, let me warn you, never try to lift this piece out by this part right here, because you could ruin the whole system pretty easily. So there's actually only 3 screws holding this whole thing in place. One is down here by this black fan, one is over here, and one is down here under it. And these are all regular brass screws holding it in, so you're going to want to take these 3 out. And as you're taking them out, you'll realize that as they get more loose, they get more difficult to take out, which is odd. This thing was poorly designed in the fact that it doesn't line up very well with the holes, so the screws may go in kind of crooked before they straighten themselves out. Once you got this out, right here, under it, there is a port that connects this laser system to the motherboard under it. So when you're lifting over here, be careful you don't tilt it too much. So you're going to kind of grab it like this by this metal base, not by the black plastic, and pull up. You'll feel some kind of resistance, but it should come out relatively easily. And there's the port, and there's where it was connected at. So set this to the side with your other electronic pieces. Obviously that cannot be washed. If you try to wash that, I will punch you. Don't ask how, but I will. Okay, so next we're going to take out the rest of the screws holding this in and this fan. So this fan has what I call the tiny brass screws, because they're obviously exactly what I just said. They're tiny brass screws, and they are really oddly shaped in terms of brass screws. So I actually had to switch bits to get this one out because they're so tiny. So you want to get these out. Whoops, that was probably loud for you guys. So as you're taking these out, make sure to separate these 2 guys into their own little pile by themselves, because they're the weird guys. You can actually lift the fan up and pull the screws out if that makes it easier for you. So after you do that, you can set the fan kind of out of the way, basically. And the controller ports can lift up, but they're kind of difficult because they're actually connected in this piece of plastic. But what you can do is lift them up and pull them away at the same time. And after a little bit of struggling, they will come away. But I'm not going to worry about that right now because there's other things I have to... Whoa, I just got it on accident, honestly. Completely by accident, I got it off. Yeah, you're going to have to lift it up more than you are out because they're connected to these little plastic things right here. So after you've gotten the controller ports out like that, there's 2, 4, 6, 8 more screws you have to take out. And there's 2 regular brass screws right here and here. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 black screws. And you're going to remove all those screws whoops, I have the wrong bit in because I took out those weird brass screws on the fan. Alright, you're going to take these screws out, and again, separate them how they are. You don't need to separate, if you're wondering if you need to separate the black screws from the screws that hold the console together, which are also black, you honestly don't. I would, but you don't have to, necessarily, because they are the same in terms of, like, size and shape and everything. However, sometimes it's just better to keep the ones that were inside on the inside and keep the ones that were on the outside, just for, like, purposes if you don't know, like, what they were or anything like that, if that makes sense. That probably doesn't make sense. So as I'm removing all these screws, I'm separating them into piles. And the reason I paused there was because I was confused, because when I took this apart the first time, I did it in a different order, so I didn't have a pile for these black screws started yet, and I was really worried that I accidentally did something wrong. Okay, so finished taking out all these screws. I'm sorry I'm doing this on video. I know most people are going to complain about it, but it's what I got to do to make sure that everyone understands certain things. And I do make really good points whenever I'm taking all these screws out, so I would suggest staying for that and listening at least. Okay, now if you wanted to clean, the fan is probably the part that gets the dirtiest, or dustiest, I guess. If you want to clean that, you can, just like using an air gun, but if you really, really want to get it clean, like the inside, you can take off these two tiny brass screws, and the fan will come apart even easier for you to clean inside of it. I'm not going to do that because I don't need to, but if you wanted to, you could always do that. So let's try to get these screws out because they're stuck in there. Alright, there's one more here. And I think this one actually got stuck last time I took his part. Okay, so now there's nothing holding this thing together. So what you want to do is flip it around. I'm doing this so it's easier for you to see. It's not easier for me at all. And you're going to lift up on this piece of plastic. Lift up on it and pull it towards this way, away from the console. And it will pull out. And this is why, whoops, this is why it would not come out on its own. Because this was fed to two pieces of plastic that were under this metal sheathing right here. So that's why it was hard to get it out. So set that aside. That is with the washable pieces. And you're going to carefully take the console, flip it over, and kind of shake the rest of the motherboard loose. It's going to be kind of tight in there just because it's like used to staying in here. Another way to go is by the controller ports. You lift up right here and you can get it out. And now I can get out that last black screw that I couldn't quite get out on its own. Alright, when you're holding it like this, take the fan and flip it on, and take the controller ports and flip it over like this. And you can set this aside with all your electronic parts too. And last but not least, there's one piece of metal sitting here with these two tiny little rubber feet on them that will come off on their own and they will stick back down. They're pretty cool. Take this, and then you're down to the bottom of the console. Wow, it only took how many steps? And like 300 screws. But I guess they didn't want the Dreamcast coming apart, and believe me, these things are never coming apart. So now you can go ahead and wash all of your pieces with soap and water. The pieces that are washable will be listed right now. However, all of them are obviously optional. If you just wanted to take this apart for no reason, that's fine. Just put it back together now. So what you can wash is the bottom half of the console, the controller port cover, which has the ABCD labels, the power and open button, the lid to the console, which looks like this. Again, if you want to open it, pull this little thing, like, whoops, like that. Wow, this is Loctite. There we go. You have to pull it away. Sorry, I was trying to push it forward. This is all washable. I know there's a lot of parts I didn't take off, but it's all washable. Believe me, I know what I'm doing. Not really, but I'm fine. You can also wash this, but make sure to take these little rubber feet off. And you can even wash this tiny little piece of plastic that was in there if you want to. Obviously, it's optional. So, after washing all your parts, I will get back to you with how to put it back together. Okay, one thing I should state, you have to let all the parts air dry, and if you kept the lid together like I am, leaving it open like this and sitting on the table like this on like a towel or something is the best way to let it dry, because then not only does the like underside of the lid dry quicker, but the inside, like in here around the walls, will be able to dry quicker because air will be flowing like in this way towards it. And just keeping it open is basically just an easier way to let it dry quicker. But again, you gotta let everything air dry until it is completely dry. You don't want any moisture inside of this whenever you go to put it back together. Okay, if you're watching this part of the video, you're probably wondering, how do I put my Dreamcast back together? You basically just reverse every single step we just did. And if you have like a video of you taking it apart, then just watch that on how to put it back together. If not, this is why I'm making this part of the video. Putting it back together is pretty easy, actually. I know it seems like a pain in the tuchus to take apart, but it's really not that big of a deal, honestly. So the first thing you're going to do is take the base, and if you're looking at it, you're probably going to be looking at it the same way I am. So you want this big boxy thing right here to be facing your upper right. And I know for you guys it's facing bottom left, but for me this is the upper right, which is what you want. So you're going to take this metal piece with the two tiny little rubber feet on them and drop it into place so that it fits like this. It looks like this. And the first step, is going to be putting this back in. Now if you remember, there's all kind of crazy screws that hold this thing in place. So the first thing you're going to do is just drop it in place and make sure that it fits correctly. Make sure that you line up the two ports into their holes down here on the bottom. And it should fall into place relatively smoothly. You can put your controller ports down. For right now, they don't need to be put in place because they'll have to be moved anyway. And then you can take your fan, if I remember how this goes, and put it in. Now, first thing we're going to want to do is screw the fan back into place, because if we don't do that, then we're going to have to struggle with it later. So you're going to take these two tiny brass screws. They should be the only two really small brass screws you have. And you're going to screw the fan back into place just like we did taking it off. There's two little plastic arms extending off of it. You're going to put these tiny little plastic screws in to hold it back together. And after that, your fan is fine. You can take away your smaller bit for your screwdriver because you'll never need it again, or at least for this console. And you can put the bigger one back in. Okay, so now we're going to screw this bottom plate back in. And if you recall, there's a lot of screws holding it back together. So, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screw ports for this thing. Now, if you recall, some were black and some were brass. So I'm going to tell you right now, 6 of these were black, and that is the one next to the fan, the 2 on the extension port, and these 3 down here by the other 2 ports. Those 6 are black, and then there's 2 over here, 1 right here, and 1 right here. Those are brass screws. So I'm going to skip putting this back together because I'm sure you guys know how to put screws in. So after you put those in, you just do what I'm about to do. Alright, I got most of the screws in, and you guys are going to be pretty mad at me, but what you want to do is refrain from putting in this black screw, and this brass screw. Keep them out, because what you want to do is put this back into place, the controller port. So I'm going to do this from your angle again, so this is easier to see. So you're going to take the metal by this part, lift it up, and slide this into its DM, and lift it so that it'll fit into place over here. On this side, you'll see there's like 2 little slots that they have to fit into place in. But at the same time, you have to push it forward so that it fits into those little 2 holes down there. Alright, so I got it in. Alright, there you go. It's kind of hard to get in, but once you get it in, it's in. So now you can put in your 3 screws that you were supposed to keep out, but I told you guys to put in like an idiot. And after you put these in, we're going to screw the controller ports back in, which is actually not as easy as some may think. So, excuse me. After you've done that, you're going to take the controller ports and try to slide it back in so that they fit into this little plastic cover. It should look basically like this. It should be as clean as a fit as ever. And you're going to take your 4 long brass screws and put them in the 4 holes on controller ports. Now I would suggest doing the 2 outside ones first, because those are the easiest to get in, and they also help line up the 2 middle ones after you put them in. So after you put those in, then you can go for the 2 middle ones. It doesn't matter which one, I don't care. And like I said, this is not the easiest console in the world to take apart. The easiest console I've ever done probably had to be either the N64 or the front loader NES. Those were both like extremely easy to do. So after you've tightened those screws perfectly, next you're going to grab the laser system, which is this piece if you're wondering. And now again, be very careful, pick it up by the metal base, not the plastic sides. And so what you're going to do is also never turn it upside down without putting your finger right here, because this will fall out. If you want to look, this always gets really badly dirty, and I told you not to wash this, obviously. You don't want to wash the laser system. So you can kind of brush this off with your finger just to make it look more appealing, basically. So turn it over, and make sure that you line up the port with the port, and it'll basically fit in a lot easier than you would think onto the port. It basically falls on into place. You just have to push it down a little bit. And then there's the 3 regular brass screws holding it in, one over here by the fan, one over here, and one down there. So we're going to put those 3 in. Putting this one in first is the easiest one. I actually switched screwdrivers here to get more leverage on the other 2 because they want to go in crooked, which is kind of a pain. But once you push them in crooked, they will start to go in a lot more smoothly. Basically, you have to force them in as they're going in crooked, and then just let them line up on their own. Yeah, this one's really bad. It's usually whichever one you save for last is bad, no matter whether it's this one or the one down here. After you screw it in a little bit, it should fall through pretty easily. Okay, so after you got the laser in and lined up and everything, next you're going to take this little piece of plastic that you either did or didn't wash, it was completely optional, and you're going to take it and put it back in. It should line up under this clip and over a little white piece sticking up right here. Then you're going to take this and make sure, putting it back together, that you feed the wire under this. I'm almost positive the wire goes under it. I might have to fix it. But put the wire under. Okay, I forgot about this. So there's these 6 metal things that were sticking up. You will notice the holes that they go into. It's kind of hard to line them up. And as you can see, I'm probably completely in the camera right now because I'm trying to get it in line. Okay, it felt like it was lined. There it goes. We get it under the clip. Okay, should be under the clip. Actually, wait, I'm not sure. We're gonna keep, for easiness purposes, basically, that's all I can say, we're gonna keep the wire above it. I'm not sure whether it goes above or below it. I can't honestly remember 110% where it goes, but I'm gonna keep it above it. It is pretty easy to get. It doesn't really matter, it still will function, obviously. But you're going to put in the 2 screws that hold this thing together. One is over here by my thumb, and these are just regular brass screws. And then there's one under these gray wires that are twisted together right behind this little plastic cylinder sticking up. And you're going to put the 2 screws in those. And after that, you're going to take the switch and line it up like so. And the way you want it lined up is that the black box sticks out on one side. You want it facing the controller ports. Basically, you want it to look like this whenever it's put back in place. And there were 2 regular brass screws holding that together. You're going to have to kind of line it up with one hand and screw it in with the other, which some people can't do. It's kind of not the easiest thing in the world, but it's not really that hard either. I can't get this screw to stay in. Okay, there we go. So we screw that back into place. Okay, now we're going to set this aside for a minute or so, but first you want to kind of tuck this wire back like this so that it stays out of the way whenever we're trying to put the 2 halves back together to make a hole. Take your lid that should be dry, but then left it like this to dry, which would have been a better idea. If you guys were watching this, you should have done that. And you're going to take the lid, close it, and if you have this foam piece, you're going to glue it on right now, which I actually have to do, so I'm going to go get some glue. Okay, I got the glue and I glued the foam back onto the piece right here. It's not coming off anytime soon. Get the hot glue strings out of the way. It is glued on, right? Yeah, it'll stay. It didn't look like it was, but it'll stay. Okay, so after you've got that on, you're gonna flip it back over and take your power and open buttons. In every other console, it's an eject button, but on the Dreamcast, it's an open button. And you're going to pop them back into place. They basically just fall back into place, honestly. There's nothing too crazy about putting buttons back in, and this one should like spring back up and function again. And then the second to last step, which you would think it's the last, but it's not, you're going to take the two halves and put them together to make a hole. Actually, this is the third to last step. Alright, this is the hardest area to get to line up correctly because of that port right there. But once you get it in, you flip it over, and then the second to last step, you're going to screw these black screws back into place. And the one thing is this console does not lay flat when it's upside down, so you gotta hold it down with one hand while screwing it back together. And I just threw that screw across the galaxy. Alright. If you heard that crack, that was just the two pieces falling together. That wasn't me breaking the console. Teeohh. So, I'm getting these last two screws in, and you may be wondering, what's the last step? And if you're wondering what the last step is, you must be pretty stupid, because you must have completely forgotten the very first step in cleaning and restoring this thing. Let me get this last screw in, and then I'll explain what I'm talking about. Okay, looks done, doesn't it? It functions, the open button works, the power button springs down and back up, everything's fine. But what did we forget? We forgot the extension cover. Silly us. Snap that back in. Now the console's done, and that was the last step. So if you liked watching this cleaning and restoring, thank you for watching, I guess. And please leave a like or subscribe to get more of these videos out there. So thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you next time.